Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Asad Lalji. A warm welcome to all of you all for the next live session of Avid Online. For those joining us for the first time, a very special welcome. Please refer to the chat box for more information on Avid Learning and our partners for this evening's discussion. Music and dance has always been the soul of our curatorial philosophy, and the last five editions of a cross culture series cover the fusion of disparate art forms. The impetus of today's session was to celebrate Shirin Isal's recently published book, Sargam, and to acknowledge the role of visionaries like Shirin who have facilitated and championed the best of the Indian arts and culture to travel world over. I recently experienced the Casa de la India in Valladolid in Spain and the work done by Guillermo Martin. I would be amiss if I did not mention Arun Shivdasani of the Indo-American Arts Council in New York, who I've had the pleasure of working with for decades. So today, we pay homage to these catalysts of culture, and it gives me great pleasure to present this evening's discussion. Avid Learning, Furtados, Indian Music Experience Museum, the Royal Opera House, Mumbai present Across Cultures Sargam. The sixth episode in this series intends to explore how the arts have traversed boundaries to foster global connections. I'd like to extend a warm virtual welcome to our esteemed panel. We have with us multi instrumentalist composer Balaji Srivastav, OBE, Kathak dancer and choreographer Aditi Mangaldas, impresario and author Shirin Isal, dancer, actor, painter Mesma Belsare, moderated by classical and contemporary dancer Uttara Usha Kurlawala. For more about each of our speakers, please refer to the extremely impressive bios that have been posted in the chat section. They were emailed to you also earlier. The speakers will shed light on the artistic melange of cultures and their practice. With a focus of fostering cultural exchanges, they will share how they have navigated through the cultural differences in mindset, yet succeeded in creating an ecosystem where new connections have been birthed and nurtured. Please note the session will last 75 minutes, followed by a 15-minute Q&A, in which Uttara will be taking questions submitted by the audience, so keep them posted throughout in the Q&A box. On that note, thank you once again for tuning in. Over to you, Uttara, and look forward to a fascinating session. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Asad and to Sagar Bhagat also for helping us so proficiently hosting this exchange and making us all feel comfortable. I must say that made it very easy. Thank you also to Shireen for initiating this dialogue between us because of her book. So as Asad told you, we'll be talking about cross-cultural sharing, and hopefully when we talk about our process, about experiences, about artistic growth, it will leave somebody to take away a little nugget with a bit of luck. Okay, so this evening we have four amazing individuals who've agreed to discuss their work. And before I introduce them, I'm just going to briefly introduce myself with a little video. We each have some videos or visuals for context, so that when we speak, you know who we are. Because I think the art speaks more than the person. So would you please play my video, Asad? So far behind. Sorry. I never knew this was what I'd find deep inside. Am I in the world, or is the world in me? Am I looking out? So that was a single shot video of a live performance in New York City in 1985, before you had digital videos. My apologies for the graininess. And let's continue. Okay. So first I want to introduce Shireen. Shireen, you've been teaching, I want to say teaching, no, but not really teaching. You've been curating and working with artists for the last 40 years and then some. And we have so little understanding of what makes the work of an impresario. I was wondering if you would mind addressing that a little bit.
Thank you, Asha, and thank you to Asad and Sagar and you for giving us this opportunity to talk about our work. My profession, starting in 79 and for the following 40 years, was that of artist management, working as an impresario for classical Indian musicians and dancers in Europe through my association called Sargam. My job involved representing artists in every aspect of their European tour, from negotiating contracts to overseeing visas, travel and hospitality details, providing that link between artists on the one hand and the organizers who presented those artists in countless European cities on the other. My aim was to build up the careers also of younger artists in the West. I worked entirely alone, taking on the role of manager, driver, sometimes cook and confidant, as we spoke with so many artists at my kitchen table over endless cups of tea. It was a highly unusual profession at the time I started in the 1970s. I had few reference points. Learning as I went along, there was a kind of stepping into the unknown aspect to it. You can say that I was a one-woman army, so to speak. And when I needed extra foot soldiers, it was my husband and my children who helped me, and I owe them a tremendous debt for having sustained me over 4 decades. I started in 1979 in Paris. Asha, you were my first artist in June of that year. And you quickly followed it up, your Paris performance. That's why it stays so special for me. You followed up your Paris performance with further performances in the French provinces. You went to Tours, of course, and many other cities. Why did I branch out into Europe? For 2 reasons. One was that I was made aware of the tremendous interest that European organizers expressed in having Indian artists. And so by 84, artists were going to other countries like Holland, Germany, Belgium, Denmark, Switzerland, and eventually to the UK. Secondly, it was worth their while to go to as many countries as possible, coming as they were all the way from India. So as time went by, an average tour would consist of 6 programs in about 4 to 6 countries for each tour. And I tried to take on about 4 to 6 tours a year. The experience overall was one of pure magic.
Sweet. That is so sweet. You've been working with and you've connected with some amazing international artists. Could you name a few of them for us? And also, would you tell us who was the most defining artist that you worked with? One who had an impact on you?
Bismillah Khan sir. Without any doubt, he was a deeply inspirational figure in my life, both professional and personal. What he taught me went beyond music, and I sat at his feet like so many other people, listening to his words of wisdom. What inspired me about him was his deep and abiding faith in the Almighty. So when we went to a hotel room, when we arrived in a hotel room, I recall in Paris, he took out his compass, and the first thing he did was want to know the direction of Mecca. Another example, when we drove to a concert hall. With other artists, we would chat, we would talk. Khan Sahib never spoke, he prayed. So throughout the journey, he would pray, and suddenly I found myself praying along with him. But different prayers, but we communicated through our prayers. And the third thing is, one day he told me, Izalji, you're giving me all these concerts. Wonderful. But what really counts in life is, and he pointed to the heavens. And I will always remember this. In Khansa, there was moral clarity. So he talked to me about lessons in life. And when I had a dilemma, I asked him for explanations, and his explanations were easy to comprehend, but above all, very, very comforting to live with. And I continue to remember him and his words even today. And to end, well, that beautiful and benevolent smile on Khansab's face. I think I was blessed to have known and interacted with him, with this God's own man who came to touch my heart and my soul. So yes, Bismillah Khansab, without any doubt.
That's wonderful. Could you explain your interaction with the artists in the photographs? I know there are more photographs.
Yes.
And how it informed your choices in the work of Sargam?
Of course. So, Sagar, if we can have the, that's right. Now, these are Carnatic artists. On the left, Maharajpuram Santanam and his son, Maharajpuram Ramachandran. Then Geeta Raja, Carnatic vocalist. And the last photo is of Ravi Kiran, who was synonymous with the instrument, the Chitraveena that he plays. Very early in my career, I developed a personal interest in Carnatic music along with the Hindustani tradition, and was determined to offer Carnatic artists to European organizers and audiences. So it became my mission to bring both Carnatic and Hindustani musicians and dancers on par. And I was thrilled because it met with considerable success. This is also because there were South Indians staying in different European cities, and they were so thrilled that they would talk to their local organizers about the artists. I also worked considerably with Indian dancers of the South Indian tradition. So Bharatanatyam, Kuchipudi, Mohiniyattam. So there was Swapna Sundari, Rohinton Kama, Vaijanti Kashi, Vijay Prakash, Geeta Radhakrishna, and Malavika Sarukai. May I go to the second set of photos, Saga? So this is, these are two photos of Pandit Ravi Shankar, and in the first photo you have Ustad Allah Rakha Sahib also. I would like to pay tribute here to the role that Pandit Ravi Shankar, through years of performing for Western audiences, played in laying the foundations of Indian music in the West. He did so with single-minded determination. We've all been beneficiaries of this. I recall when he came for his annual concert to Paris every year. He would come from, for example, Milan, where he'd performed the day before, and next day we'd drop him off to the airport where he was on his way to Stuttgart. He performed colossally, and we, both Indian musicians and Indian music, owe him a profound sense of gratitude. Even those who leveled against him accusations of musical compromise owe him this profound sense of gratitude. I had a beautiful working relationship with him. He was kind and understanding, even when I made mistakes. Very gentle, as was Ustad Allah Rakha Sahib. So I was very privileged to work with both of them. Next, please. I've spoken about Bismillah Khansab. This is the cover of my book, Joy, Awe and Tears, and you can imagine the joy and the awe I felt, or at having artists once again become very dear friends of mine. And here I must cite one in particular, several in fact, Srimati Lakshmi Shankar, who came every year for almost 30 to 35 years, sometimes twice and three times a year, stayed with us. Other artists like Begum Parveen Sultana, who is my sister, Geeta Radhakrishna, philosopher and artist with whom I speak every year when I go to Bombay, Rohinton Kama, my Chota Bhai, and Malavika Sarukai, and Gauri Sharma Tripathi, and of course Asha. So there was the awe and the joy. There was, I'm afraid, also tears at what I perceive to be acts of betrayal. I think one finds the good and the not so good in every profession. And perhaps I was naive to think that it wouldn't be the case, but it was. So my interaction with 50 soloists and their accompanists and my pride in representing India culture abroad is all recounted in the book. And yes, to end with hindsight, I would do it all over again.
That's amazing. Thank you. Your book, by the way, is amazing. I have it right here. I'd give it a shout out.
May I just add for anyone who is interested in knowing more about the book, perhaps they could contact Asad and he will give them my email and we'll go further with that directly. Thank you.
We move on this evening to talk with Sir Balaji Srivastav. He's an OBE, that means Order of the British Empire, no less, and the composer and expert of several instruments in their style, sitar, surbahar, dilruba, pakhavaj, and tabla. Wow, I can barely say it in one sentence. Sir, we have been so excited to have you on this panel. And the first thing I want to ask you is something you've been asked all the time, is what you said. And that is, what are the challenges and the advantages of living with, as you call it, sound as a primary mode of interaction with the world? And you also spoke to me about many types of hearing. That was fascinating. Could you share a little bit about that?
Hello, pranam, namaste, sat sri akal, adab, salam to everyone in the world and Royal Opera House and Sargam and all organizers. So yes, sound is the most important aspect in visually impaired or blind people, or I call them X-sighted people, because without sound we can't exist. So sound, smell, taste and touch, 4 things are very, very important. And as you're talking about different kinds of sounds, yes, I do hear selective sounds. I have got, if I want to hear someone particular in a crowd, then I just focus my compass of my ears to that person, and the other people keep speaking and I try to ignore them as much as I can. And so that's what I do. And sound is also very important, because if it's coming from which direction, how I can manipulate that. And when I hear in orchestra, I have to, because we don't see each other when we work with Inner Vision Orchestra, which is my orchestra and orchestra of blind people. So we don't see, and we have to communicate by sounds. And when there are lots of microphones, every sound comes from one direction, from the speaker. But when we are sitting on the stage, we know who is where, who is sitting, and I can direct that way. Or they can tell me as well if they have some problems or some things to change in the sound. And of course, electronics has, I would say, it has given lots of opportunities and lots of different options, but it has also spoiled, because when I play sitar, for example, I want to hear original sound of the sitar, but turning the flat bass or treble, that changes the sound. And sometimes engineers decide what they want, and if I have to have lineup check, like in big shows like in pop singers, with playing with pop singers, you don't have very much time. hardly 5 minutes you got. So then it just decides, the engineers decide to change the sound. And it's not the same sound as I would like to have. So, and the recording as well can change lots of things, lots of options, but lots of disadvantages as well. So sounds, this is what the sound I can describe. And also when I walk with my walking stick, I can hear the sound, open air sounds, and sometimes there is nothing. But if I have passed the street, I can understand left, right, which is open, which is not open, and in front, what is this there? And sometimes I hear when I put the stick on the floor, I can hear the sound, a reflection to me, so I know there is something in front of me. And before I touch anything, so I was actually, when I came first time to England, I didn't know anything about mobility. And a mobility officer came to train me, and he said, okay, walk. So I was walking from my house, and he said, you do much better. You don't even tap your stick, and you just hear the trees, and you hear the walls, you hear everything. So you just hear it. And that's how I have used the sound in so many ways. And anything else, if I've missed, please ask me.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember you were saying that you could even tell the formation of dancers on a stage by the sounds that they were making. That was amazing to me.
Well, that's that's the same thing, you see, because if someone is dancing, and if I'm sitting on the stage, that's totally different, because the stage is moving, then I know which is the stage moving more and less. I know who is small and who is big, who are the children and who are the adults. And also when I'm sitting in the audience, also I can feel, because if I'm sitting too far, probably 4 or 5 rows back is okay for me. Then I can feel the vibration, I can feel the all kinds of vibration I feel. And I did tell in one dance to Linda, who was sitting next to me, I said, well, is she too big? I wouldn't like to use the word fat. And she said, how did you know? And I said, well, because I can hear her movements are getting a bit slower than, the rhythm is getting a bit slower, and also the stage is vibrating like, it's just, I can hear. So that's how I worked it out.
Thank you.
This is one way.
Thank you so much. We'll move on to Aditi now. If you don't mind, Aditi, I'm sorry that you have a bad throat and.
Sorry, can I add something?
Yes, of course.
And I'm very, very proud.
We'll come back to you. Yes.
Sorry. I'm very proud to say that I'm the first non-Western composer who has been accepted to give me commission by Arts Council in 85-86. Before, they wouldn't give any commission to non-Western people who just, because we as a blind person, I couldn't really write any music. So unless there is a written music, they wouldn't commission. So first time it was big argument in our Arts Council, and thanks to Simon Dove, who praised me and who appreciated me, and who has made sure that I get first commission, and that was very nice. And since then, Asian music or non-written music is also accepted, as long as there is a recording of some kind.
Thank you. That's very important. We'll come back to you again. Meanwhile, just let's move on to Aditi, and then we'll come back and then revisit everybody with more questions. So Aditi, you're trained extensively in Kathak. You've just come back from London. You're in Delhi now? Yeah.
In Bombay.
Pardon?
In Bombay.
You're in Bombay?
Yes.
Oh, okay. You really are global. And she is though she's trained in Kathak and she does Kathak, I would call her a contemporary performer, a choreographer, and a dance filmmaker. And dance films in the sense of films for the camera of dancers, not just rolling out a video of somebody performing on stage, as in the case of my film. Right. So Aditi, tell us, how does your training and your work in Kathak classical dance help you in your contemporary and cross-cultural work? What is the support that it gives you?
Hi, Sarah, thank you for having me here, and thank you, Asad and Sagar, for inviting me to be on this panel with such esteemed people. Was wonderful listening to Balaji, Pranam, Adab, Sat Sri Akal, and well, I have learned Kathak. I only teach Kathak. My company consists of Kathak musicians and Kathak dancers. So the company is, but there was a point when I asked myself that if I want to express something, if I want to talk about something that I need to communicate. That is a primal desire in me to communicate. And what if, to the best of my ability and my knowledge, I'm not able to do it within the larger parameters of Kathak? So there are two options available to me. I say, well, just stifle this desire, or I find a vocabulary that I can communicate this through. And how I explain this is that I sow the seed of Kathak Uttara, and when I water it with the wider, again, parameters of Kathak, when I water it with that, influences from across the Kathak spectrum, then a Kathak tree grows out. But when I water it with contemporary sensibilities, thoughts, processes, different movement patterns, then that seed, though it was a Kathak seed, grows into a different tree, and it reaches another part of the sky. So the roots are the same, if I may say so. And therefore, I call my work, the contemporary work based on Kathak, as absorbing rather than fusion. Or I find that very confusing. So I absorb into this Kathak body, mind, and heart contemporary sensibilities, and through that make work.
So can you talk about your current project or one of your recent projects? What are the cross-cultural and interdisciplinary aspects of it? I'm very excited about the work that you're doing right now. I don't know what you want to talk about.
Sure. Well, there are two projects I'm working on. And I'll talk about one because that's more sort of taken structure, which is Forbidden. We started it, it was going to be premiered in 2020, but of course we had to postpone it. Forbidden is about female sexual desire. It's something that I've been wanting to dance for a while, and I'm really excited to dance it at this age and stage of my career. Because from time immemorial, from any society you look at, whether it's the most liberal society or the most non-liberal society, female desire, sexual desire has has always been a taboo subject. Why is the world scared of female fantasy? Why are women judged, controlled, compartmentalized, and eventually punished for having the courage to own their desire? What is it that female sexuality would release? What is it about the female body that you don't have agency over your own body, your own sense of pleasure or joy or sexuality? What is it? So it's a piece called Forbidden, because whichever country, whichever society, culture, upbringing, it's always it's constantly judged. I mean, look what's happened in the United States right now. It's just beyond shocking that I don't know how many old white men decided about I don't know how many millions of women. It's just you can't, there's no rationale to it. And I want to say it now at my age, because though the forbidden is nothing to do with age, it's not about ageism, it is about women who can be young, old, single, divorced, widowed, married, in an affair, living with somebody, doesn't matter. It's about why are we so, why do we drop walls when we talk about female sexual fantasy? Maybe my entry into the work has obviously been through what I grew up with in my mythology, though it's just an undercurrent stream that feeds the work. I've been really happy to collaborate with some of the top dancers, light designers and people in the world. Michael Hulls is doing the lights. And because we are talking about this cross-cultural thing, this is the first time, Shirinji, that I'm collaborating with a British musician, because I've always collaborated with Indian musicians, because that was my level of comfort, even in my contemporary works based on Kathak. But this time I said I have to step out of this comfort level, because the subject itself is stepping out of my comfort level. So Nikki Wells has done the music, Farooq Chaudhary is the dramaturge, Morag Deyes is mentoring me. And so it's this wonderful collaboration with some amazing British artists. Sagar, maybe Uttara, would you like to see some of the slides?
Absolutely. Please.
Sagar, would you
Sagar,
mind?
would you? Yeah. Are these from the same piece?
Yes.
Amazing. Oh, intense. So talk us a little, for just a few seconds more, about these collaborators that you're working with and how they contribute to your process. And does it go smoothly, or do you have blocks in your communications with them? Do you have an example of one of that?
Well, since they're all in England and I'm here, what is very important to me is a parallel inquiry, and a parallel creative process. So it's not one person is translating something. So we've had many discussions. And this current last 2 years of the lockdown, in fact, pushed us into that whole process further, where we were constantly on discussing the concept, discussing how it was possible to have, let's say, I begin the piece with what I say awakening. It's about an erotic dream. And that was the cue given to all my collaborators, that it's what starts off as complete innocence. It's a dream. It's a young girl having an erotic dream of all the possibilities of desire that are going to flower. It's about this dream where she's discovering these buds within her, and that's going to flower. And when this is then shared with the light designer, the music composer, I film it, I dance it. So it's always give and take. I have always felt, Uttara, that I want my work, and I don't know whether it happens or not, to have multiple entries into the work. So it's not one dimensional, but hopefully multidimensional. And so the light design is not lighting me, is lighting the concept of why is the world scared of female fantasy. The music is not just saying, okay, this is an erotic dream. No, it's this whole arc. And there are give and takes. And I think where you have to, what is positive is that there are so many amazing inputs from everybody. I feel you have to be vulnerable. You have to be open to criticism because, I'm a storyteller. I'm a kathakar. My stories have changed over the centuries. But when I tell a story, I may think I'm communicating, but there are 6 people to whom it's not reaching out, or it's reaching out in a different way. That's why you have a dramaturge and a mentor. And then they give you feedback that, look, you may want to say this, but it's not coming through. So it's always give and take. I learn a lot from that. And eventually, I'm the choreographer of the piece too. So the eventual responsibility will lie with me. And therefore, I will take the call eventually of what to accept, what to not, and how to work. But it's been wonderful so far, touch wood.
Oh, it sounds amazing. And may you have many more such experiences.
Thank you so much.
Can we just move on to Mesma, and then we'll try and come back to everybody again?
Sure.
Okay. So Mesma, you there? There you are. I hope you're feeling okay.
I am. Thank you.
Thank you. So as a painter, choreographer, sound design artist, actress, you found very diverse outlets for your creativity. And I keep wondering, like Balaji, what is the same in all of these activities for you, and what is different? What is common to your experience in creating new works, because you have different genres, and what is specific to the discipline that you can say only in that discipline and not as well in another? Or is that not the case?
Well,
yeah, complicated question, sorry.
yes. But first of all, I just want to thank this forum, Avid Learning team, Asad and Sagar, for organizing this beautiful conversation. and for Shireen ji for initiating it. I feel very honored and humbled to be a part of this eminent team of speakers as well. And to go after, to go at the end is a very hard thing to do, but I'll try my best. I think a lot has already been said, especially by Aditi ji, because being an artist, you know, we often operate from similar spaces, and the space to the desire. It's the desire to communicate, like Aditi ji said, and that impulse, that need, that imperative to reach out, because you have to say something, but also, what if there's no audience for it? What if no one's watching? What if there's nobody around to acknowledge it? Would you still create it? And that is the question that I ask myself all the time, is that where does your desire, where does it lie in a space of authenticity or not? And different mediums, like you had mentioned, whether it's painting or it's dance or it's film, I'm stimulated by visuals. If an idea excites me, I see it in my mind, images come to me, and then there is this intense drive to translate them into some kind of a form. And that form could be dance, that form could be a painting, that form could be music. I consider them all forms as manifestations of these ideas, these stimuli, these creative urges. So what I find, that is what I think is the similarity, and the idea of flow, you know, which is quite a known idea by now. I don't need to explain what that means, but whatever manifests is the consequence of that flow. Yeah. Now, the difference, however, is that in dance, especially in Indian classical dance, because of the way it has developed over time, it is an art that requires a team. It is an art that requires musicians most importantly, and then a guru, and you know, the whole, you need a setup for all that. Now, when I immigrated to the US, I felt extremely culturally displaced and without that kind of a community. So I had to quickly figure out ways of expressing, letting that urge find a vent without the support of that kind of a community. So I ventured into theater. I ventured into puppetry. And I made my own puppets. I made my own sculptures. I integrated them in my dance. Whether or not I did them well, I don't know. There were probably some very bad examples out there. But what was important is that I indulge myself in it. And then I had this opportunity to work at the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts for 10 years, where I curated programs to help uninitiated audiences, to help them look at the contemporary Indian art collection through a different lens, the lens of performing arts. And that helped me connect the seemingly impossible connections between performance and paintings, sculpture. It's hard for me to describe it in the span of this panel.
Please show your video. That would, you
yes.
wouldn't have to describe it then.
Okay, wonderful. I think I prefer that anyway. So let us.
Would you like to? And then you can continue. Yeah.
Yes, please. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I should have thought of it before. That was intense.
You know what occurred to me, Uttara, as I was watching it, is that what Aditi was talking about, female desire. The film excerpt that you saw was created during the pandemic. And I created it in the confines of my 400 square foot apartment in Boston because there were no resources available. And I was on a deadline and I had to produce a film. So I quickly learned how to make a dance film. I quickly learned how to create a film on an iPad by myself. I only had a neighbor who was a scientist. So I called him and I said, "Can you hold this iPad and be my cameraman?" And I did the lighting and I blackened my apartment and made this film. I learned how to edit the film and all that. So, but the point I was trying to make is that the concept of desire, here is where artists unite across cultures, across geographies, is that here the Saraswati is coveted by her father, Brahma, and she is enraged by that. And instead of running away from him, she exposes herself to him in a way that he can't handle. So her sexuality is so out in the open for him, is that he turns away and runs away from her. So, so you see how artists, through what we create, dispel and challenge at the same time.
Okay. I think we've come to the end of the first lot of questions, and I had promised Balaji that I would return to him. So let's go back to him and ask him one question, and that is that when you are working in a new environment and you are working across genres with a variety of musicians and in a variety of different cultures, you've collaborated with all kinds of amazing musicians. How do you make your music accessible? What makes the connections across these cultures and across these groups and across these divides of disciplines?
Amazing question is how they make it accessible to my music, because I'm Indian musician and I play Indian music and I hear their tracks and according to that I play and they accept it because they don't know anything about Indian music. But for me, music is Sargam Padhanisa, and the rhythm, and all the notes are the same, 12 notes, and plus we have got shrutis and microtones, which is Indian musicians are more familiar than, well, maybe some Arabic musicians are also quite familiar with those sort of things because we do experiment, we play, we improvise, and so we have habit of improvising, we have a habit of listening and learning from them and responding that way. So, and I'm very amazed that all these musicians, they have accepted my music, and I have played with Kathak dancers, Pratap ji, Priya ji, Nahi ji, Abhay Shankar, and very, very good dancers I played. And I have played with theatre. I've worked with theatres as well, with Tara Arts, Asian Theatre. And I've done one production, for example, which was reviewed by lots of newspapers, Times, Sunday Times, and all this. And only the music was appreciated, and all the actors and directors got jealous, and they did another project, a production, the same production, but this time 2 musicians, and so none of them was mentioned. So that's what happened. So I'm very happy that music is appreciated in so many different ways. I have worked with lots of pop musicians like Stevie Wonder, Boy George, Annie Lennox, and lots of musicians. I can't really remember now. And
Wow.
so I have worked, and they were all very happy, and I'm very happy with them. And I have played with Kathak dancers in India as well. Bharatanatyam dancers with Dhananjayans I played here. And I'm very pleased to say that there was one blind violinist in Dhananjay's dance group. And it is very difficult so for blind people to perform anywhere because nobody wants to perform with them. I mean, I'm the prime example. I have been so famous. I've got OBE and I've got all sorts of things, but people just don't ask me to work. Especially Asians, Indians, I must say. Except I'm very, very thankful to those dancers who have asked me to work for them. And also some people have given me some concerts. I'm very happy, and especially Asad ji and yeah, I'm very, very happy to perform for Opera House, and all blind people were performing there. And so I'm very, very grateful. And now the Inner Vision Orchestra is doing very, very well. And see, charity begins at home. If nobody asks me, I clap for myself. So that's what I've done with the Inner Vision Orchestra. And still I'm playing with pop musicians, but that doesn't satisfy me. I would like to play with Indian musicians and Indian players and dancers and so on and so forth. And so maybe we can have some of my videos. If everybody's asking, why shouldn't I ask?
Oh, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was really important to see. Yeah. Okay, so I have just one last question that's the same for everybody. It's about globalization. Globalization, not like in McDonald's, but globalization as in the shrinking distances between traveling, the shrinking time zones, the working across time zones, working in social media, working with digital work. How has all of this changed your career path or affected your work? And where do you think it's helped or not helped at all? What are some of the big changes that you feel have been brought on by this kind of changes in our environment? Shireen, do you want to go first?
Well,
You talked about waiting. I loved that.
yes. Well, it's wonderful to have knowledge at one's fingertips, to be able to communicate that knowledge with the click of a mouse. But compare this with the early years when I started in 79. A concert proposal would travel by post to say Varanasi, where Ustad Bismillah Khan Sahib would similarly reply by post. There was no question of phoning. I didn't have the means. So we learned to wait. And on those rare occasions when I did phone, and I believe you mentioned you had to go through an operator. And I remembered one instance when I waited a whole Sunday for a call I placed in Calcutta. And when I was exasperated in the end and asked my French operator, what the hell is going on? She said, madam, the Indian operator has left for tea. And so we all, it was amusing at the time, and we lived it and worked at a different pace. With globalization came cheaper international travel, more travel opportunities for the artists. More importantly, better exposure to other cultures, which means that audiences are now more clued in. They've heard of artists, they want to see and listen more. But more knowledge also means that they are more discerning, more demanding of quality of the art form and its presentation. And we get instant feedbacks like the good and not so good. Communication is cheaper, but above all, marketing is quicker and easier. Again, if you go back 40 years, you have the, leaflets and posting, and so it was more expensive. Bless that click of a mouse. I often wonder how we managed without, but we did.
That's amazing. Maybe Balaji can pick it up from there.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. It was very amazing for me to come from Agra, from India to Nice in France. And yes, I didn't know anything about European culture. I didn't know about European currency. I didn't know anything about European language. And I had to learn all this on my own. And I give you one example, what happened to me and how life has changed in one day, I would say. I was stuck somewhere in banlieue in Paris, near, and I decided to travel or take my life because for 25 days, I was inside the house, looking after their house, and I was getting nowhere. So I took my stick out, and I didn't know French at all. And I took my sitar out as well. And I said, station, 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 because I think that's a common word. And somebody understood. So somebody put me on the train, and I ended up in Paris. I heard some flute player, some guitar player playing together. And I got off there because there's lovely music coming. And he said, oh, do you play sitar? And I said, oh, that's wonderful. Somebody speaks English here, so I can understand. And I said, yeah, I play sitar. He said, I play tabla. And I said, even better. So he plays tabla, and he speaks English. And he took me to his house, which was on top floor, and first time I have seen some gentleman making pita bread and giving me all this. And then next day, somebody else came to my room and he said, Balaji, we have heard about you and I want to learn sitar. And I handed over my sitar to him. He was a fast, very good guitar player, so he was playing very, very fast on sitar. So I said, you know everything, you don't need to learn from me. And this and that. And so we got friends there, and then so that's how I got into Paris. And I didn't really have to learn French for 4 months, but I heard. And when I came to Paris to go to India, I wanted to go to India because I was so fed up. And two students came to me, and they wanted me to teach them. And they started crying and put on my, they fell down on my feet, and I had to I had to get my ticket back and cancel my ticket. And I had to stay in Paris for those people. It was wonderful, and there were several reasons I couldn't go to India so easily, which I don't want to come back to you because it's a long story, long history. I'm too old. So now I would say that, yeah, it was. And then I have learned French as much as I can. And my daughter, she has learned French academically. And she says, well, you're better than me sometimes. So you can understand. This blind man, who was at that time about maybe 29, 30, has learned French. And I didn't know anything about it. And Linda has taught me to swim when I was 40. So I'm constantly learning, and I'm still looking forward to learn more.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Does anyone else wants to pick up on that answer, Mesma or Aditi, or both of you? Aditi, go ahead.
I think as a human, the human race is very resilient, and as artists more so. The last 2 years have taught us that. I remember when we went into this really strict lockdown, first it was immense anxiety of the unknown. Then came acceptance, adaptation, and then transformation. And I must say that you introduced me as a dance filmmaker. No, it was like Mesma said, self-taught. I was lucky to be in a house with my son and my daughter-in-law. So, and a few iPhones and Zoom. So there we were from day one saying, okay, how do we transform what has happened? And therefore, and started making films. And learned in the process of, you can see the difference between the first film made and the last in the past 2 years. So had this globalization not been there, this way of communicating, the internet, honestly, I don't know how we would have existed. I have to thank this current situation. Of course, it has the pandemic happened because of globalization, because of this, as Shireen ji said, no waiting time, it's just instant. But right now, I think we as artists we adapt and then we transform and we breathe the air of today. So we can't live in a vacuum. And so if the world is going in a particular way, our environment is going in a particular way, either for it, against it, with it, we need to be in that sphere. And at least that's where I am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mesma, how do you find authenticity within all of this going on?
Well, I'll just add a couple of things to what has been said. I completely agree with Aditi ji, is that the resilience and the adaptability of artists is really exemplary. And I say that with great humility. I think it's very difficult to keep on changing oneself through the changing times, yet it is absolutely essential that one does that, because artists respond. We respond to the stimuli of the world, whether we are living in isolation or we are living in a globalized world. Either way, we are going to absorb and respond. And our work is that response. You see it, you see that, you see what effect it has on us in the work. So it's that will speak. I will also add that this communication, this proliferation of communication technology has forced me to adapt extremely ferociously and in a very short time. I've learned that brevity is a virtue in this in the IT world. Attention spans are dwindling, they're shrinking, and for us to have the same impact that Picasso had in Guernica, we don't have that luxury of time. We have the ability, we have the avenues to release our work, but we don't have the luxury of time. So what do you do to compensate for that? And that is the constant learning process. So I've had to diversify my output, my sharing avenues in such a way that there are 30-second clips, there are 1-minute clips, there is an evening length performance, there are an hour-long educational videos, there are quick interviews. So, all this has to be also done well. So, the skill, the demand for multi-skilled, multi-dimensional artists is growing, and we ought to respond to that. So that's all I wanted to add.
Wow, great. So I don't know if we have time for another question or we should start questions from the audience. But I do have one quick question. If anybody here wants to answer it, is because it's relevant because two of our people here have COVID, is how has the pandemic affected your growth as an artist?
Okay, can I say something there? Because
yes, please.
Pandemic, we blind people are very difficult to move anywhere. We're not allowed to move anywhere. And blind people who live alone, there is no one to take care of them. Very, very difficult. And musically, so we couldn't play music together. In Zoom, you cannot play music together.
That's right.
So what we do? We discovered a software talking about the time relativity, and we always adjust ourselves. We find some way or the other way. So we found a software called Gemulus, which is only audio version, so we don't need to see each other. But it reduces delay almost to nothing. So there is a delay, but you still can play. And that's how we have played lots of compositions with. Also saying that when we were allowed to work, I've done 3 albums in 1 week. And one was the Balaji Interaction, Classical Interaction, and one was the Spring Ragas, and one was the Seasons of India, 6 Seasons of India. I've done those 3 albums in COVID time. So there was a lot of work. So if one wants to do, there is a lots of ways to do it. And if you don't want to do, simply, oh, it's a COVID and I'm going to lie down and not do anything. Goodbye. That's not the way. That's not the way I have learned. I have, since my childhood, I have decided that I want to be independent, and that's why I cannot work with bosses. I'm the boss of my own. So this is my weakness or my strength, whatever you can call. but that's how I have been since childhood. And for that, I have learned typing, computing, whatever I could learn, and I'm independent in every way. Luckily, I've got Linda, who is very, very helpful. She is everything for me. And if she was not there, probably I would have more difficulties. But still, not to say that I couldn't survive. I could survive with difficulty. But Linda has made my life very, very, very easy. And she has written 123 letters when I came to London, and every letter was responded. People have responded, letters, that's fine, but how many concerts I got that? So I'm not really very happy with a sighted crowd who just think, oh, he's blind, so it's a difficulty, and he will need someone to guide him. So I have been through all this. So I'm not very happy, but never mind, my life is quite about to finish. Hopefully other visually impaired people will not have the same difficulty as I have, and that's why I've designed Inner Vision Orchestra, where they can learn quite a lot, and they have learned to be confident. We had the Iranian woman who was always wearing niqab all the time, hijab, and she couldn't speak to anyone, and now she is the loudest person to say if she needs help. Is there any sighted person? And so she is that confident, and I'm very, very glad to see this confidence. Talking about sexuality and talking about those, and she was exploited, of course, as a blind woman. She has improved a lot, and there are other musicians who didn't want to play because it's very difficult for blind people who live alone to move. I said, look, take your instrument, move one foot, the second will follow. And that has, helped lots of blind people. They are working. But still, I would say, why not UK blind people? Tell me one UK blind person who is as famous as a Stevie Wonder, Andre Bocelli, those sort of people. Because UK is so difficult to work with. They just don't have Asian box, this box, that box, put in the box, and let's do it. That's not the way to do it. So I want to work with everybody. That's why I work with multiple artists, multiple musicians, and I have played lots of instruments because I believe in, like language, in playing. I just take any instrument, play something, something will come out. It's up to the audience to decide which they choose for me. So the audience have chosen sitar for me, and I'm very happy that sitar is my main instrument. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to address that question about COVID, a pandemic? No?
I'll just quickly add, Uttara, that I just wanted to add a quick thing to the globalization question.
Please.
Globalization can also have a homogenizing effect on artists because there is a temptation to plagiarize because there's so much input, there's so much information thrown at you that if you make yourself accessible to it all the time, then it will affect one's work. And that is something that I have personally tried to be conscious about. And about the pandemic, I can only say that during the pandemic, I kept telling myself, look, if you have a house to live in, and if you have food to eat and access to medicine, you are among the fortunate. And I was, and it allowed me to isolate myself and focus on my work. So.
Wow, thank you. That's very helpful. Okay. Let me open up to some of the questions in the audience. Yeah. So I'm going by the ones on the top. How do you think an artist finds their own voice? What has the process been like? So, any one person like to take that? Aswa, you want to take it? Aditi, you want to take it? Shireen, you want to take it?
I'll let the artist start.
I'll
Let the
let
artist
Avid
take it.
speak. I think she's more qualified to speak.
Oh, please, no. Uttara, is it that how do you find your own voice?
That's right. What
And
has the process been like for finding your own voice?
I think honesty.
Misty.
Honesty,
Oh, honesty. Okay, sorry.
no shortcuts, I think. What one's own voice is a question. So I'm not assuming that I have my own voice. But I think to have passion, abandon, and no shortcuts, I think, especially now, I mean, because we were talking about globalization, one of the things is this quick ascending the ladder in terms of your artistic development. You need to really it needs to brew a lot. And I find so that's one of the things I would say. The process is really hard work, passion, abandon, honesty, and vulnerability. I think I would say, and I've said it often enough, that I am guided by doubt rather than certainty, because doubt makes you question, lets you listen, whereas certainty just drops you into one slotted place. And yeah, I mean, on a panel like this, I think for quick answers, that would be my answer.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. We do have to go with quick answers from here down.
One quick word
Yes,
word
go ahead.
is total, absolute love for the medium that you identify with, without a question. You can't do this with just discipline unless you are totally in love with your medium.
Immersed in it.
Very
I
well.
would say dedication, discipline, and determination. 3Ds finds your voice.
Okay. Come on, Shireen, you have something to add?
Well, the 3Ds would be relevant for any profession. I mean, the profession I took on, if I hadn't followed the 3Ds, then I would not have created in my artist the perfect conditions to work in the West. And I was that bridge between East and West, that buffer, so to speak, so that I gave them the perfect conditions to express themselves. And I remember Bismillah Khan Saab telling me one day when I hurried him because I didn't want to miss a train. And he said later on, and very gently, he was always very gentle with me, he said, Izalji, mood bigar gaya. And I realized that day that if I wanted the artist to give the best of themselves, or herself, I had to.
Sorry.
Okay, Asad, you have your hand up.
So I have another D. It's dinner or drink, but no, I'm just kidding. But thank you so much to the
Very
panel
important.
The accept.
for this wonderful conversation, and Uttara for so skillfully moderating the session. You know, I have a personal interaction with this panel because I discovered my passion for the Indian arts and culture from people like Shireen and living abroad. And I don't know whether I was missing it or whether I just discovered Indian arts and culture living in New York. And I really, I think that formed what I do at Avid and at the Royal Opera House. So thank you, Shireen, for being such a torchbearer. And when we met a few years ago when the Royal Opera House opened, and then we met a few months ago with your book, and I said we've got to do something for you, but you were leaving like 3 days later. Baluji has been at the Opera House. It was one of the most special events, programs, performances I have had in my tenure of 4, 5, 6 years at the Opera House with Balaji, and we're trying to get him to come back. And I'd
That's
like all of
wonderful.
you all, Aditi ji. I mean,
Thank you very
we've been
much.
plotting. It's not happened yet, but hopefully soon.
Yes.
But thank you all for being here. Thank you for being part of this series. It's very special, and I loved what Balaji said. Learning never. He said he keeps learning something new, which is our mantra of learning never stops. And you can't wait for the lockdown or all these things to kind of have impaired us. And at Avid we did 240 programs in the first year online, and thankfully we're back to the real world. But this online world is too exciting and too rich to give up. And it gives us this whole cross cultural and a global landscape to interact with, to share with, to learn from. So this is not going anywhere, according to me, at least according to Avid. But we look forward to having you all back in Mumbai at our stages, and continuing this Sargam, as Shireen has so rightly started. Thank you very much to our audiences for joining in. We have a wonderful performance for those sitting in Mumbai. On Friday, we have Shweta Shetty, whose sensational 90s performance of Bollywood. We're bringing it back. Sometimes we have to do a retrospective and to go back in a retro world just to appreciate where we come from to where we're going. So hopefully, if you guys are around, it's at the Opera House at 7:30 on Friday. So hopefully we'll see you there. Until then, we will see you online, or stay tuned. Follow us on social media. Check out our website. And thank you very much once again for joining in. Thank you
And
to our
I'll be very happy to play with any of these icons I'm talking to here today. So please ask me to serve you, and I'll be your humble servant.
wonderful. Thank you very much. Good night.